Good morning, Stoner Prairie. Today is Wednesday, February 17th.
Happy birthday today to Miles Finger, Maya Wilfer, and Nyela Travis. Happy half birthday to Jocelyn Heideke and Renaya Murphy.
Happy birthday to each of you. Well, Miss Schlitz, today, instead of honoring one person, we are actually honoring a group of people known as the Pullman Porters, who created the first Black Union.
Interesting. Who were the Pullman Porters?
Well, just a few years after the Civil War, many African American men, many of whom had been formerly enslaved, were hired to serve white passengers traveling across the country on luxury railroad sleeping cars. Like I said, this was right after the Civil War. So many of the men were underpaid and overworked, and they endured constant racism on the job. In fact, they weren't even called by name. Instead, passengers just called them George, after George Pullman, the wealthy Chicago businessman who hired them.
Wow, that sounds really dehumanizing.
Oh, that's a big word, Miss Schlitz. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, dehumanizing is a tactic that's been used throughout history as a way to justify cruelty to groups of people who are not in power. When people are treated as less than human, it helps those in power feel more justified in treating them poorly and even hurting them. Pretending as if the Pullman Porters didn't have their own names and identities and were just there to serve wealthy white passengers was dehumanizing.
That's right. Well, Pullman Porters became famous for their superior service, but were still treated very unfairly. So, in 1925, A. Philip Randolph worked with the Pullman Porters to create a union and demand fair wages and reasonable working hours.
It took a lot of time to get their demands met, but eventually they did. And the Pullman Porters also served as change agents in their communities. They carried new forms of music like jazz and blues and new radical ideas from urban centers to rural areas, from north to south, and helped to fuel the Great Migration. Remember, this was before the internet, so it was a lot harder to see the world if you weren't able to travel easily from place to place, like on a railroad.
Wow, there is so much to learn about the Pullman Porters and the great influence they had on our country.
There sure is. We just touched on a little bit of the Pullman Porters' history, and I would encourage our learners to check out some more information to learn more about them. And now we have Mrs. Folberg back for our Why Wildcat Wednesday. She's answering a question from one of our Stoner Prairie students about the Earth. What do you have for us, Mrs. Folberg?
Hi, it's Ms. Folberg. Have you ever seen one of these before? You might have one of these in your classroom at school. It's a globe. You might not know this, but I'm a little bit obsessed with globes. Look, I even have a globe lamp. One at home and one at school. Now, you probably know that the globe represents the Earth. It shows where the land and the water are and on our planet. And you might have even noticed the shape of this globe. It's sort of a ball shape that we call a sphere. A sphere is a three-dimensional shape that is curved all over with no straight lines. Well, someone named Yutong has a question about the shape of the Earth. Let's give him a call now.
Hi, Miss Folberg.
Yutong?
I have a question for you. Why did ancient people think Earth is flat?
That is a great question, Yutong. Well, when I asked Stoner Prairie students what they already knew about this question, I got some interesting responses. Both Connor Stewart and Serenity Hilseman mentioned that they heard that ancient people thought if they sailed far enough across the ocean that they would sail right off the edge of the earth and fall into space, like falling off a giant waterfall. Many of us have heard that people long ago believed this. To us, it may seem obvious that the earth is round. Our teachers tell us the earth is round. We see spherical globes at school, and we have also seen photographs taken of Earth from space, showing the round shape of the Earth. Now, just because we know that the Earth is round doesn't mean that people have always known this. Now, for some ancient people, they just never even thought about the shape of the Earth. Maybe they were too busy trying to get enough food to survive. Or maybe they just didn't wonder about things like this. But lots of ancient people did have ideas and thought about the earth and the universe around them. We call this idea of organizing everything in the universe a cosmology, after the word cosmos, meaning outer space. For example, Doug says that the ancient Chinese people more than 2,000 years ago believed the earth was shaped like a giant cube. And over in Europe, the ancient Norse people thought Earth was flat like a pancake. How do you think they got these ideas? What did they observe that made them think this? Well, many of you had ideas about why the ancient people would think the Earth is flat. For example, Aaron Lara wrote, "They think that because they have never seen the Earth." It's true. Back then, you couldn't go out in outer space to see the Earth. Chandra Jayasuriya, a University of Melbourne cartographer, said, "Once upon a time, it made sense for people to believe that the earth was flat. Ships would sail off toward the horizon, and often they didn't return. And those people left behind didn't really have access to information from other communities coming to see them. They lived in a village that was the center of their existence, and the further away from the village they traveled, the more dangerous the environment became. So they didn't typically travel that far." Daniel Christian added this idea. They thought that because wherever they walked, it was flat. Think about it. When you look ahead of you, when you're walking around, it looks like a straight line. We call that line the horizon because what we see appears to be a straight line in the distance. It looks like there's a flat edge. And that if you went far enough, you could fall right off, like going off a cliff over a waterfall. So, if the earth is round, why does the horizon look like a flat line? Well, Aria Anderson wrote, "I think Earth looks flat because it only bends very slightly every so often because the Earth is so big. When you look far off into the distance, you are actually very close to the Earth. Too close to see it curving. Well, imagine that this toothpick is you standing on the Earth, and you look out in front of you. All you can see is this tiny bit of Earth. And when you turn around in a circle, all you see is that flat edge, which is in fact a circle or a slice of the sphere. But if you were to go higher above the Earth, like in a hot air balloon, you would see something more like this. Now do you see the curve? When you move farther away from the Earth, you can see more of that edge, and your eye can detect the change in shape, the curve. So you might be wondering, who did discover that the Earth was round, and how did they figure it out for themselves? Without space satellites, what evidence did they find to support their idea that the Earth was round? The first person to really figure out about the size and shape of the Earth was a man named Eratosthenes. If you're a 4th or a 5th grader, you might have heard of Eratosthenes when you learned about prime numbers and the Eratosthenes sieve. Eratosthenes was a librarian. His library was in Alexandria, which is now located in what is now Egypt, Africa. Part of the library he worked in is still standing. You can actually visit it in Egypt today. But Eratosthenes worked in the Alexandria Library a long time ago. He worked there about 250 years before the year 0. That means he discovered that the earth was round more than 2,250 years ago. Because Eratosthenes was a librarian, he collected information. He was interested in information about Earth, and he collected information about measurements of distances between places on Earth. He used the information and measurements that he collected from the library to do some math calculations. The math calculations looked something like this. Basically, he figured out the curve of the earth based on how the sun's rays were hitting the earth and making shadows. But if the earth were flat, the shadows in two different places would be the same size at the same time. But if the earth is round, there could be a shadow in one place, but no shadow in the other, like this diagram shows. In summary, Greek philosophers established that the earth was round as far back as the 3rd century BC. But it wasn't until the 15th century that it became commonly accepted. And even today, some people just don't believe in science. That's why we have to learn how to check things out for ourselves. If you want to know more about how you can prove the earth is round with your own observations, check out Mystery Doug's video. The link will be in your question survey. Well, that's all for this month's episode. The world is filled with incredible wonders. Now, for the next episode, I checked my email and my survey, and I chose 3 questions. When this video is done playing, you'll get to vote on one. You can choose from: how are electronic devices made? What is flammable and not flammable? And what is dust? Stay curious.
Awesome. Well, that's it for today's scoop. Let's finish it off with our February affirmation.
You ready, Ms. Musgrove?
I'm ready.
You ready, Stoner Prairie? Repeat after me. I am somebody.
I am somebody.
I was somebody when I came in.
I was somebody when I came in.
And I'll be a better somebody when I leave.
And I'll be a better somebody when I leave.
When I fall,
When I fall,
I will pick myself up
I will pick myself up
and dust it off.
and dust it off.
I am strong.
I am strong.
I am powerful.
I am powerful.
I deserve my education.
I deserve my education.
I have things to do,
I have things to do,
statistics to crush,
statistics to crush,
and people to impress,
people to impress,
and places to go.
and places to go.
I am somebody.
I am somebody. And as always, Stoner Prairie, remember to be safe,
Be kind
be responsible,
and be a problem solver.
have a great day.